The question is, are labor councils going to meet the moment? Are unions going to meet the moment and really come together to make the most of this, where we can really transform our economy, or are we going to miss it and continue with the way things have been?
We have on the line with us, Jay Malone he's the political and communications director for the Texas Gulf Coast Area Labor Federation. Makes up the Galveston, Harris, and Tideland labor assemblies. Really looking forward to this conversation because, I am not only a member of the Labor Council here in the area. I'm Secretary Treasurer of the Labor Council of North Alabama, and Adam is also a delegate to the Labor Council, and we rechartered the Labor Council back in 2020. So we're always looking for ways to help build the council, and so we're gonna talk to somebody who does this kind of stuff all the time. Jay, appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
So, first, can you just talk to us about your how you came to be so involved in the labor movement? Like, what was it that made you want to, kind of take up this kind of work?
Yeah, for me, I actually got back to the States in 2016. I'd been living abroad in Europe for a number of years, and I worked a number of political campaigns when I got back, and was kind of questioning the theory of change. If you just focus on elections, you're always relying on individuals to fix problems, and a lot of times you don't get what you're really hoping for out of that. And when I was up in Connecticut a number of years ago, I worked for worked to help elect the former director of UAW Region 9A to a state Senate seat. And I was kind of able through that election to see the power of labor politics when we really come together and mobilize and get members out on the doors and talking about our values. And so when I moved back to Texas, there was an opportunity at the local council. They were looking for someone to come in and help expand their political program. And I jumped at the opportunity. My family, growing up in Ohio, was a labor family. We saw the benefits of unions firsthand. And I'm glad that we've been able to grow power in the Houston area together.
That's great. That's great. And so can you talk to us about your labor federation? Who all, I mentioned the labor assemblies that make up the federation. What kind of workers do y'all represent? How many unions are part of it? How many workers, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the Area Labor Federation was established in 2015. It was a consolidation of 5 labor councils in the Houston area. Two of those councils, all those councils became assemblies when we were reconstituted. 2 of those assemblies are no longer active in the Brazos Valley and in Montgomery County, but 3 of our councils are still active as assemblies. And we cover 13 counties in the Houston area, with 60,000 members, 95 affiliated unions. That's up from 70 when the council was initially reconstituted. So we've grown from about 35 to 40,000 members that were affiliated with our council to over 60,000. And we're very excited that we've been able to come together like that over the past now 8 years.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. And just kind of for your own frame of reference, the Alabama State Labor Federation has about, I think, 55 to 60,000 members in their affiliated unions. So really a pretty big organization that we're talking about over there. And so for people that don't know, what labor councils are. I think we've talked about how they're federations of unions. Unions come together to form these organizations. But what is the purpose of a labor council? What should a labor council be doing ideally?
Yeah, I think that the way that we should think about labor councils is as the collective voice of all unions. Um, One of the challenges that we have with the complex political and economic uh, challenges that we face is that individual unions often, especially in the South, they struggle to marshal the resources to really take them on. And on top of that, we all have to focus first on our members and what our members need. So as an individual union, you are going to focus on, improving the conditions of your members and their families. And that's the first and the most important priority. What the council can do is help to address a lot of the bigger systemic issues that we're facing. So, I think a good example is our work around housing justice. At the beginning of 2020, we did a survey of our affiliates, and we found that housing insecurity was the top concern of members. That was surprising because it wasn't something that had really been on our radar previously. And so what we did was we launched a campaign. We brought in community allies. We worked with elected allies, and we were able to help distribute a lot of essential aid, connect people with legal support. We ended up doing 21 events, helping 7,000 people connect with assistance through those events. And those are the kind of things that in our region, where we are a right to work state, we don't have, public employees in Texas don't have collective bargaining rights outside of some firefighters and police. State employees have no collective bargaining rights. It's just a really challenging state to work in. But by pooling our resources, we're by far the largest organized interest of working people in Texas. And there's a lot that we can do that's outside of that, the traditional remit of unions.
And that's something that I have seen come up a lot lately, is that the story that housing is a really big issue for members and workers and folks in a community, and also that our civic organizations basically were not tracking that, like unions and churches and the government, like it just really flew under the radar until it's kind of come to this boiling point where a lot of organizations are seeing more the need to address this issue. And it's something that, unions have addressed in the past. One of Adam's Shop Talk history episodes, he talked about Powderly, Alabama. It's a community in Birmingham where it was founded as a residential co-op by the Knights of Labor for their members, and so it's still there today. Obviously, no longer run by the Knights of Labor, but that's a pretty cool thing. And so unions have a history of doing that kind of stuff, and so it's good to see more move towards that. Is there any other work that y'all have been doing over the last few years that you think would that you'd like to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, I think the big picture is that our work is predicated on the idea that working people can, author their own liberation. It's not that we have to rely on people to take care of us. It's not that we have to rely on, nonprofits and social services. We need to advocate for ourselves. And I think that the thing that we've learned through a lot of our work in the Gulf Coast is that, the problem with a lot of the people that are working to address these issues is that they're not experiencing them themselves. And they also kind of have a theory of change that is very different from ours. We look at it as these are collective community problems that we all have an interest in addressing. And that means that we need to bring all of these voices in, especially the voices of the people that have been impacted. But traditionally, most, especially in cities like Houston that have massive philanthropic, communities, this is rich people that are saying we need to make sure that we're getting homeless people off the street,
Right.
instead of saying, well, like, why is that person homeless in the first place? And what can we do to actually change these systems of oppression? And that's kind of the big picture of all this. We have a political and an economic system
Mm.
that creates these outcomes for working people that are not working for us. And until we kind of recognize and come together and find, organizations like labor councils that where we can pool our resources and work together, we're not going to really make any headway, because we're always going to be relying on these wealthy interests that are ultimately, like, they're the ones that are creating the problems. That's the reality that we're trying to take on head on. I think the opportunities here are really historic right now with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act. All this federal legislation is going to send, billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to our regions. And the question is, like, our labor council is going to meet the moment, our union's going to meet the moment, and really come together and organize to make the most of this, where we can really transform our economy, or are we going to miss it and, continue with the way things have been?
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right. I think that's really important. And for my own edification and for people on our labor council, how have you gotten other unions to buy into this kind of thing? Because one of the most frustrating things that I have found talking to other unions is the first thing they ask, which is not necessarily unreasonable, depending on how it's asked, is, how's this going to benefit my members? Right. And that's a reasonable thing to ask, but then they don't. I have found it difficult in some cases. We've gotten several people to affiliate and several people haven't affiliated, but in some cases it's difficult to get them to see the value of having a collective voice for labor in our community, advocating for us and doing things for our members. Even though, that's all that a union is, right? It's a collective organization of workers. And so a labor council is a collective organization of unions. And so in some cases, I have found it difficult to kind of win people over and get folks affiliated. But y'all have seen pretty significant growth in your labor council. What's your secret?
Well, I was watching your show recently with Vonda from the Nashville CLC, and I think that there are examples that we're seeing in different areas in the South, because the first thing that we all have to recognize is that the South is different than anywhere else. Like, if we're trying to take lessons from Los Angeles or New York or Seattle or Chicago, they're just working in completely different contexts. And we need to focus, I think, first on what are the examples from the South where we have similar challenges that we're facing. And I think there's a few things. One, I think the political program is really essential, because ultimately every union needs that kind of collective effort. There are very few unions in the South. Now, this is a broad statement, but most unions in the South aren't able to run their own independent programs where they can really impact the results of elections. So, I was up in your area a couple of years ago, and I know you've got some big cities in northern Alabama that are governed by Democrats, even though the state is hostile. And I think, like, figuring out where those opportunities are to elect pro-labor Democrats and really have an impact in those elections is a really critical first step, because that's what kind of builds the credibility of the council and brings people into the process. But then having, like, a really intentional strategic planning process. The AFL-CIO developed a really helpful set of criteria that we use in our strategic planning, where we have a bunch of different buckets of work. and then we sit down with our affiliates and assess the progress that we've made or lack of progress, get their honest feedback on what we're doing, and kind of think as big as possible. Earlier this year, we successfully wrote and won a contract. We won a contract with the county, with Harris County, which is the county that encompasses Houston, that is going to that's worth $9.5 million. That's going to help us expand our apprenticeships. And that came out of conversations. That work, the work we did to write the grant, the work that we did to pull all of the planning together, came out of conversations with our building trades, where they said, obviously the first and foremost thing is growth. They need more support in their training programs. This is something that helps to drive membership. And we recognized that there was an opportunity with the American Rescue Plan Act to go after federal stimulus dollars. And we were able to pull, application together. We had 11 unions that were part of it, that will be a part of it now. We're actually running that right now. But it's really, really understanding what those interests are. And honestly, like what I found on the council is, like, sometimes, people aren't always going to tell you exactly what they want to accomplish. So you need to figure out ways, like we did with this contract, to really help people think big about, like, if you had unlimited resources, what would you want to do? And that's where we've been able to get to, is where we're able to think really big about what we can do together here.
I think that's a really good, some really good advice, and where I can find the time. That's some of the stuff that I try to work on, and hopefully one of the things that we are really trying to push over the next year with our labor council is school visits. And I know that the trades really like pushing their apprenticeship programs, because they're really good. Their apprenticeship programs, if it's the equivalent of a college degree, both in the amount of education that you get, and then also the earnings that you get afterwards, and then you don't have the debt. So that's pretty cool. And so we want to talk to more people about that in schools, and we're working on that. We've been in a few schools already with some iron workers and folks like that, stagehands. So hoping to build that out. Before we let you go, do you have any advice to unionists, workers, labor activists across the South about getting involved in their union or their local labor council, and anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrapped up?
Yeah, I think that the way we need to think about this phase of history that we're going into is, we're in a moment where we have the resources, largely thanks to work by the Biden administration, to transition into a completely different economy that works for everybody. This is a historical moment. And we know we have allies in the federal government. President Biden was walking the picket line last week. We also have a lot more allies in local government than we think. What we found is, as we've, kind of grown awareness of the labor movement in the Houston area, we're getting a lot more support than we sometimes thought before, because, a lot of these elected officials just weren't aware of what we did.
Right.
In areas like ours, where, we have 5% union density, very few people that come into elected office have any interaction with unions. They have very limited knowledge of kind of our model and kind of what it can do, what it means to empower ourselves through unions on a job, and what that means for our interaction with our communities. And people want it. Like, people want to find their ways into these jobs. They want to expand them. Everybody that I talk to, they talk about how either they wish they'd done it themselves, or they have a cousin or a son or daughter who they want to try to get into our programs, into these jobs. And so, but I think, like, the really important thing is that we need to understand the context that we're working in, the local context, identify the opportunities, and then understand each of our interests really well, because too often we have mistrust of each other. This is something that I see regularly. When you come into a council meeting, there's somebody from the building trades that maybe says something that's off color, or says something that doesn't fit with your values. But like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're an enemy. That just means they're coming from a different place, and we need to understand that. And that's the way that we move forward, is by, we're all trade unionists ultimately. Even if some of us have different politics, at the basic level, there's a reason why we're all in those rooms together. And if we really come together and work together, we have the resources, we have the access to resources to fix all of our problems. And we need to seize the moment. And I think that working within your local council, that's a way to do it.
Jay Malone, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yep. All right, folks. Like I said, that was Jay Malone, political coordinator for the Texas Gulf Coast Area Labor Federation. If you're involved, if you're in a union, make sure that you are involved. Make sure that you're involved in your union, and then make sure that your union is affiliated with your local labor council, and that your union participates, and all that kind of stuff. That would be really helpful. And like you said, there is really, I think there's a lot that can be won just by talking to people, because I do think that, especially when you're talking about the local level, these people are not like getting millions of dollars in kickbacks. Typically, these people are, they're making not really that much more than the average worker in the area. A lot of these people are part-time. They have other jobs, so in the local scene, I do think that you leave a lot on the table when you don't even talk to the local officials. Nobody makes the case. Nobody educates them about stuff. So it's worth doing, for sure.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.